Sometimes the wood chips as you machine it. So an easy way to do this is to take a little hand saw, you saw the hole just a little bigger, and then you insert a piece of similar wood into the hole that you just cut. Watch as I cut. What I've done is I've taken and chipped a little piece of wood off of a piece of walnut, the same thing. And it's very important of what you do is you take that little piece of wood and then you hammer it with a hammer to flatten it out. Now the reason for this is you want it to easily fit into the hole, but when the glue is applied, it starts to swell up and it'll fill that hole very tightly. Okay, now let me put some glue on it. We'll fill the hole back up. I've applied ample glue to the part. You let that dry overnight, you cut it off and you sand it down, and again you won't be able to tell the difference in that joint. A way to save a lot of time when you need to make a lot of repetitive cuts, for instance, let's say you're making 8 or 10 drawers for something. What you do is you align your wood the first time exactly where you want it on your jig, and then you take and put a little indicator or a stop like I have here with this little bent nail, and you lock it in place. And now every time you want to do a second one, you just take this out, put another one in, index it over till it touches this stop, and they're absolutely repeatable. I mean, you can do hundreds of them exactly alike. On the other jig, or another way of doing it, if you don't like doing the nail approach, you can just take and screw a block of wood to the backer board, and it does exactly the same thing. It stops the jig, it stops the wood in the jig at exactly the same place. So for repetitive cuts, it's absolutely identical. So you can make parts like this and all the parts will be totally interchangeable. Now I'd like to show you a little tip that makes a dovetail joint look more actually handmade. After you've put the joint together, just put a straight edge up to the back edge and then just scratch a little line just like you see right there. And what that does is that gives it the appearance of a handmade cut, because that's one of the operations that you do when you put it together. If you are going to do sharp, thin material, then these larger cutters, you just cannot bring them down far enough to be able to cut very thin without the bearing falling off the guide. Now you can see where when you use the small cutter, you can bring it down, down and down, and you can actually cut 1/8 of an inch or less and still have the ball bearing in contact with the working template. That's why these small bits are so important to you, especially if you do small box work. It's a little more work, but it's a lot more finger friendly. To replace these wing nuts, what you use is a T-nut and either a round or a square piece of wood, drive it in place, drill a hole in the wood, put the T-nut in, and now you have a much easier to use clamp than these wing nuts. If you're only doing 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch joints, then the 3/4 inch thick working template works just fine. When you get down into the 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch thick boards, such as I used in this box, you need to go to a thicker template for your working template. And let me explain why. It's very easy to understand with this example. What you do is you glue together 2 1/2 inch pieces of MDF, so you end up with a 1 inch thick board when you cut it out. Now you can see that as this is adjusted down, you can see you still have plenty of space down here for the router bearing to roll on, and then you can get accurate cuts on very, very thin wood.